Well, let us call to order. We have everybody. I'm counting. Let's call to order the meeting of Northwest Borough Council for January 20th at 7:31 p.m. Welcome all. Mr. West, could you call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. President. Fred Bush.
Here.
Mona Elshaks.
Here.
Rob McGreevy.
Here.
Michelle Pananopoulos.
Here.
Cindy Rickards.
Here.
Vice President Bob Weisbord.
Here.
Mayor Andrea Deutsch.
Here.
And Council President Aaron Mudrick.
Here. Thank you. All right. I have no specific comments this evening. I think we're missing from the agenda. We need to do a Pledge of Allegiance is there, number 2. Mayor, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the
To
flag
the flag
of the United
United
States of America
and to the
and to the
republic
republic for which it stands,
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
liberty
and justice for all.
justice for all. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Do you have any comments, Ms. Mayor?
Just a couple of brief ones. I hope everybody had an opportunity today to watch the historic events down in our capital. Some exciting things happening in our nation and our world today. The second thing is I have our monthly police report that was just submitted by the chief, and I will submit that. For review, statistics show that crime is very quiet in the borough, and things are maintaining a quiet cadence, and that's always good for those of us in the borough. So we like that. I have an exciting announcement for our police department. Paperwork has just come through, so I am now allowed to announce we're going to have a promotion in our ranks. So Officer Mike Bernaccio is going to be promoted to the position of sergeant. He's our longest running officer in the borough, and we are very proud and excited to have his services. And I just know that he will serve our community to the best of his abilities, and I think that'll be great. We're going to have a swearing-in ceremony as soon as a few technicalities are accomplished, and we'll be having that very soon. So, thank you.
Thank you. Great. All right. We will now, I'll let Solicitor Walco take over to join us from the meeting into a public hearing.
Thank you, President Mudrick. Yes, we will adjourn the meeting temporarily and into a public hearing on the ordinance on the agenda today. A zoning ordinance, a comprehensive zoning amendment ordinance, amending a number of items within our zoning code, including the front facade requirements, fence regulations, zoning hearing board powers and notice requirements, parking credit, entitlements, building height and first floor height requirements, frontage and width requirements for commercial and mixed use buildings, site plan standards when multiple buildings are on a lot, and nonconformity regulations, as well as adding a few definitions. This is an ordinance that was advertised, was discussed in depth by council. I see Mr. Bressi is here. He gave a very good overview of all of the points of changes that this ordinance makes. Since that time, we did receive a county planning commission review letter, which recommended some technical changes, which were made, nothing of substance in the ordinance that is before you here today. There are a few exhibits I'll mark for this hearing. First is Board Exhibit 1, the ordinance itself. Board Exhibit 2 is the legal notice for tonight's hearing. Board Exhibit 3 is the proof of publication of that legal notice in the Mainline Times, which was published on December 6th and December 13th, 2020. Board Exhibit 4 is the proof of submission of the ordinance to the Narberth Planning Commission, which was submitted on November 23rd, 2020, subsequently reviewed, and we did receive a review letter back from the commission. Board Exhibit 5 is proof of submission to the Montgomery County Planning Commission on November 23rd, 2020, and as I mentioned, we did get a review letter back from them dated December 23rd, 2020. Board Exhibit 6 is the proof of submission and reception of this ordinance by the Montgomery County Law Library as required by state statute, which was received on November 30th, 2020. I'm not sure if council would like to go through any items of this ordinance again in depth. It was crafted with the help of the Planning Commission, Mr. Bressi, as well as the Montgomery County Planning Commission. Ms. Dobbs, our consultant there. Again, it makes a number of cleanup changes when items that seem to have been lacking or need additional clarity were found under past projects in the code. This addresses those. And again, this is something to be expected as this code rolls out to fill in the gaps. It was reviewed favorably by both planning commissions. And with that, I will turn this over to the public to see if the public has any questions regarding this ordinance. I'm scrolling down to see if I see any hands. I'm hearing none. I will turn it over to council to see if council has any questions regarding this ordinance.
I have one small clarifying question. Todd, I apologize if you went over this. I'm on page 8, section J, 501. Talking about general to all zoning districts. How is an elevator penthouse different than an elevator tower? In this, it says permitted encroachments such as chimneys, parapets, spires, stair towers, elevator penthouses, and tanks shall not be included in calculating building heights, but then elevator towers are referred to in different sections of the ordinance. Can you clarify what that means?
Am I on?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I actually don't think there is any distinction between an elevator penthouse and an elevator tower for the purposes of the ordinance. I'm not sure why there's a difference in the language. You're the first person who's pointed that out, but functionally there's no difference. It means the area above the shaft and above, where the elevator cab travels, where the mechanical equipment might be, if it's an elevator that has overhead equipment.
Okay, when I saw the different language, I'm thinking, are we approving some sort of like fancy penthouse floor with the elevator because the language is different, but they mean the same thing. Thanks.
And that is something that I think was in the original codes, not part of the changes that were made with this ordinance.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
Any other questions from council? Any other questions from the public? Hearing and seeing none, this ordinance should now be in a position for this council to vote upon it later tonight at that meeting, and we will adjourn this public hearing and adjourn back into the public meeting.
Great, thank you, John. All right, now I'd like to move to agenda item number 6, which is a presentation from our consultants, RES, Beth Beckett and Kelsey Edelin, and regarding 201 Sabine and the community process there. So with that, Beth, Kelsey, and Matt, as needed, I'll hand it off to you.
Great, thank you so much, Aaron. As many of you know, we've been involved for several months now, looking at the possibility of doing something different with 201 Sabine, possibly issuing a request for proposal to get some ideas about ways that the property could be utilized to meet community needs, and also to help perhaps defray some of the costs of capital costs of the building itself at 201 Sabine. We've been asked to run a public participation process as much as possible, given our COVID situation. We've had a series of meetings as well as a survey. And my colleague Kelsey Edelin has done yeoman's work trying to summarize the input from all of those avenues. So I'm going to turn it over to her to do a brief presentation.
Great. Thank you, Beth, and thank you all for giving us some time in this evening's meeting. As Beth mentioned, we've gotten a very robust response over the course of this process in the past few months and are excited to share some of the general and thematic findings. So I've just shared my screen now and I'll walk through. So as Beth mentioned, this has been a few months worth of public participation that's taken the form of a few meetings that all occurred over Zoom with varying sizes of audiences. The first was the tenants meeting for tenants of 201 Sabine. in the beginning of September, and then a larger near neighbors meeting, and then the largest, the President's Forum, where we had over 260 participants. Over that time, we've also garnered many mail-in or emailed-in comments and letters. We got over 50 different letters that we read through and have generated findings in this presentation. And then we did also have a community survey set up on the SurveyMonkey online platform that was open for just about a month in December, and it generated 435 unique responses from 390 households. About 85% of the people who responded are Narberth residents, and another 10% were people who identified as not being Narberth residents, but do use 201 Sabine for either the park or services in the building. And what we've generated, the questions in all of these conversations and these formal polls and surveys was just around, as Beth and Aaron have mentioned, community goals for the uses and more generally the future of 201 Sabine. We got a lot of response, and we had a few things that really came to the forefront as major prevalent themes. The first of which, and I'll show after this slide a few kind of numbers and other ways to look at the data, but the number one most prevalent theme was the preservation of existing open space at Sabine Park. Especially with the COVID-19, the Sabine Park has become a really important community asset where people are able to get out and get together and socially distance and congregate. And in addition to the open green space, there was a lot of feedback that really celebrated the existing features at the park, the playground, the community gardens. And there was also a lot of community visioning around other uses for the park, a formalized use for skateboarding that already happens at the park and other places in Narberth, and also a pretty big contingent of responses speaking up in favor of a pool, which could be seen as a potential income generator for the borough. With regard to Sabine Park and all of the potential outdoor uses, there was also a pretty strong theme for uses and goals that aligned with and supported environmental sustainability goals like those represented in the 2006 Open Space Plan for Narberth. And the second, almost equally prevalent theme as the outdoor space was the preservation and retention of existing community-serving commercial uses at the site. Wonder Spring is a critical tenant. We heard from residents of both future and past Wonder Spring families, as well as residents of Narberth who are not Wonder Spring families, but still saw that as a very valuable asset for the community. And a large contingent of people who don't live in Narberth, but come to Narberth and 201 Sabine for Wonder Spring specifically. We heard a lot of support for the Narberth Community Food Bank remaining in place at the site as well, again, as another really important community-oriented use. And in addition to these existing uses, there did emerge some interesting ideas and suggestions around future potential uses by other community groups. Some respondents suggested relocating borough administrative facilities to 201 Sabine, and other uses such as a Narberth Community Theater relocation back to 201 Sabine also came through in this process. Beyond those kind of community-oriented uses, any other reference to consumer retail uses was really couched in terms of what residents and users don't want to see at 201 Sabine. And that really speaks a lot to opposition to increasing any traffic or overburdening the existing parking supply at the site and in the surrounding streets. The last theme that came out around use was the concept of residential housing and additional residential housing on this site. And there were really mixed opinions across the board. I'll show some numbers in a moment, but generally speaking, the sentiments against a residential development of any kind were about twice as prevalent as sentiments for residential development on this site. Again, for many of the same reasons regarding density and the like. And this slide here summarizes the key question in the community survey, which again, 435 responses in total, was that which of the following goals are most important to you with regard to the future of 201 Sabine? This was also a question that we posed in the President's Forum, and this data captures the responses across these different forums. And so these were predetermined and pre-put in responses, and respondents of the survey were invited to select up to 3 of them. And off to the right in each row, that's the number of respondents who chose that as one of their options. So 284 responses said that some or all of the property for outdoor public space for community gathering and recreation was a key priority. Similarly popular, although a little bit less so, preserving the existing daycare and community nonprofit uses, and then using some or all of the property for indoor recreation space. And then the last very popular response was, again, that anything about the future of 201 Sabine is in alignment with environmental goals for the borough. We had other possible responses that were not quite as popular regarding preserving the existing uses exactly as they are, and as I pointed out, the second from the bottom, the concept and notion of residential housing on this site was a pretty unpopular response. Only 43, so about 10% of all respondents only selected this one. This slide takes a lot of that same data and just looks at it a little bit differently. The word cloud on the left takes all of the open-ended information that we got. So again, the open-ended chance to respond in the survey, as well as letters that were received, and pulls out the key themes in those. The larger a word is in the word cloud, the more prevalent and more commonly it showed up. You can see that childcare is far and away the most popular. The list on the right is the same data, just kind of shows you which are the top 10 largest words in that cloud. So after childcare, the next 4 speak to the open space and the outdoor space. So park, green space, open space, and skate park. No housing there is a more common response than housing, which came in at number 10. And then the other 3 most common themes that came out in the open-ended feedback was the food bank, the other community retail use at 201 Sabine, and then playground and pool. And in addition to the feedback that we got around the community uses and goals and priorities on that front, we also received a lot of feedback throughout the entire process about the process itself and the procedures, and feedback for how it could be better or things to consider. And as real estate strategies in collaboration with the borough, we really did our best to respond to these proactively and change and respond to in each subsequent event as much as possible. And I think that all of these are things that should also be considered going forward. The first was a desire for specificity and underlying information, such as any costs that would be incurred for different scenarios and any economic impact. And this will just inform public input and inform decision-making more clearly. The next is a desire for clarity on the council's intentions or preferences regarding ongoing ownership or any alternative disposition approaches. And to think about this, it's the question that there was a strong desire for continued ownership because that suggests a continued control over the uses of the site. And then we heard on the other side that this is it seems to be an extreme financial and administrative burden for the borough. And so would it be better to sell it? And in consideration of that, if selling without any sort of deed restrictions or other conditions around the sale would, of course, really limit the borough's ability to control future uses. So those are kind of 2 alternatives that would need to be considered. We heard throughout desires for continued procedural transparency, and with meetings like this and documentation that's being published, we are responding to that. And then lastly, we, as Beth mentioned, this has all happened in the COVID-19 era, and we did hear some concerns around the limitations inherent in that. Again, we've used the tools available to us. We have, despite the limitations, received really robust feedback, received lots of involvement in each live meeting that we've had, and lots of response to asynchronous opportunities to provide feedback. But this is something to be considered and to note and to acknowledge that we are limited in the ways that we can get out into the community right now. And so just to summarize, most of what I've said here is that this process thus far has really solidified the notion that 201 Sabine is a very critical site for some key community services, and especially as it relates to the services that happen inside the building, the unique nature of those services require continuous operations for those services, both from a, sorry, I'm getting an Adam Rosenzweig in the waiting room, and I'm the host right now, so.
Go ahead and let him in.
Okay. So just to summarize, this site is a critical site for key community services, and the nature of a child care service and the nature of a food bank needing continuous operations in order to be commercially viable and to provide the value and service that they do to the community. Beyond those points, there were clear consensus around many other elements that I've talked about with regard to the open space and what that space could look like and what that space brings to the community. And just in general, and again, in spite of the limitations and challenges faced by a largely online interaction, this process in the 4 or so months that it has been in place has generated really thoughtful, really impassioned responses from public participants. And the dialogue that has come forth has really demonstrated a deep pool of some really relevant skills and technical expertise within the community and within this team that are really well prepared, we think, to respond to this real estate problem of what to do next with 201 Sabine. And just to reiterate that, that's been a really diverse group of advocates that have been engaged in this process thus far, and the different tools and ways that we've been able to generate public participation and public input have revealed that to us. And so at this point, this sort of wraps up this stage of the public participation that we've completed. And we see here, and this is an excerpt from a map kind of project schedule that we've circulated and has been posted online on the borough's site. But we see this as really being after discussing some of these findings and discussing strategy, the decision point of whether to move forward with a formal RFP process or what alternative options there may be. So that's the end of the slides. We're happy to answer any questions that you have now. We've sent these slides to Aaron, so I'm sure if he hasn't already posted them, they will be available for future viewing as well.
They will be made available on the borough website, and they'll be available to all of council. And we will not be making it. Say this clearly: we're not making any decisions about 201 Sabine this evening. There's a lot of information here. It's going to take everyone a little bit of time to chew on it. And I expect that if there is a decision point or whatever that might be for our next step, that will happen at the next business meeting, which will be in the 3rd week of February. So with that said, council members, questions? Go ahead, Mona. I can't see all of you as long as we're sharing screen. There we go. Now I can, right, we'll start with Mona. I think you're on mute, Mona. And I am now the host.
Oh, sorry. I thought I had unmuted.
Dangerous.
Kelsey, one big question I have that I was very interested to learn from the survey, and I saw there are questions on the survey, but I didn't hear you report on it, is how willing residents are to pay to have their millage rate raised in order to support 201 Sabine, and all of the maintenance costs for Sabine. So that was a big question for me. Is that the direction council should go in? Should we keep things the way they are and just raise taxes to be able to cover the cost of the building? So wasn't that pertinent in some of the questions?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we did offer the options of, in the select from this list, there were options to not have an increase in my personal property taxes. 58 people selected that. And then there was an option to preserve the existing building regardless of its effect on the borough's operating budget and my personal taxes. 55 people selected that. So they were out of about 430 responses. So they were in that question, they were relatively unpopular options. Again, people were asked to choose up to 3. And so that may have been number 4 or 5 for some people. We did also receive some feedback in the open-ended comments and written in letters, especially around an openness to increase taxes. And we can go back in and see exactly how many that is. I think it shows up somewhere in the word cloud that there would be an openness to that, but it was a pretty small proportion of the total feedback.
And in addition to the presentation, are we also going to be able to see the exact survey feedback as well?
Yes, we have it all
Survey responses.
in a pretty raw Excel file that we can share, I think.
I'd like to see that. Thank you.
Go ahead, Bob.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Beth and Kelsey, for the presentation tonight. The information's very useful. I'm wondering if having RES draft an RFP, a request for proposal, based upon the parameters as you see them, as you've gathered them from the public engagement. Such as, the borough wants to retain ownership and control of the property. We want to maintain as much of the existing open space as possible. We want to maintain daycare within the borough, such as those kinds of items that are clearly like at the top of the, have sort of risen to the top as goals and desires of the community in general. And so I guess I'm asking if that's a possibility. I want to say more generally too that we wouldn't be having this conversation if the borough of Narberth weren't kind of in a financial pickle about how to deal with this particular asset, where we have a commercial leasing agreements with tenants who, some of whom are community service providers and others are for-profit businesses, and sort of, so we have an issue about how do we fairly distribute, say, the taxpayer subsidized facility. The facility is owned by the borough, and yet it's leased equally to many different kinds of tenants. And so we wouldn't even be in this inquiry with you if it weren't for that we were looking for some kind of proposal that could help us get out of our economic situation while also doing fulfilling the community's desire for open space and daycare and those kinds of things that they're clearly expressed an interest in.
I'm not sure if there's a specific question there, but that certainly was the that was the scope. I think originally the purpose of doing public participation was to get a sense of what those parameters might be, and then to put together potentially a non-binding request for proposal or qualifications in order to see if there's a development partner out there who could meet those criteria that we're hearing from the community, and at the same time create some revenue flow that would help with the capital needs situation.
Thank you. Yeah, I think when our neighbors hear the word RFP, I think sometimes it's scary. Oh, why does the borough want to develop this property? And I think by presenting for us a general picture of what our neighbors want to do there, now putting the RFP in context of what our neighbors want to see happen. I think it's just important to make that clear now that that's the kind of RFP we're talking about. And I guess I want to say to Council President, to other members, that I'm not sure why we would wait to make that. Why would we wait to decide whether we wanted RES to go ahead and draft a proposal like that for us to consider at our February meeting, rather than waiting to February to have that discussion? I don't see the benefit of waiting for another month is what I'm saying, unless I'm misunderstanding the process here. Can you respond to
Cindy?
that? Thanks.
Cindy, we'll go around the table and
Okay.
we'll get back to that, Bob, for sure.
So we had about 10% of residents respond, correct? You said 4 something, Kelsey?
435 in
Okay,
that
so
survey.
some of that 400 were actually not Narberth residents, but you,
About 10%.
okay. I don't think that we can then, with those statistics and that level of data, only use this to draft an RFP. I would suggest that we also utilize our comprehensive plan, where we identified the priorities and the goals of our town. That was a comprehensive 18-month process that looked at things like aging in place, for example. This wasn't a big enough of a survey response or a significant portion of the population that I feel like we can only use this without incorporating our comprehensive plan as well, and council's thoughts, of course.
Cindy, two thoughts. One, you have to take the children out of the population number. So in terms of sort of the voting citizenry, the 400 and some minus the 10% is a larger percentage. Still, was at 20 some percent. Beth, I had asked you this question when we had a call, which was, how does that number, that response rate of about 20% of the voting citizens, how does that compare with other communities, other projects you've done? What's the level of engagement that we're looking at?
I think
Should it have been better?
that's a fairly robust response rate in a community. I do understand the concern, and I think it's always appropriate. In other RFP efforts we've done, we have put consistency with a comprehensive plan or a neighborhood plan or whatever kind of overarching planning effort there's been previously. That can be a criteria as well.
So Beth, I would say, and not to get in the weeds here, but did we have a stratified sample? In other words, did we get 20% from the south side, 20% from the north side, 20% of immediate Sabine neighbors, 20% of Wonder Spring? Or do we have an unrepresentative sample of maybe perhaps a concentration of folks utilizing services or in a geographic area? And your data doesn't dig down into that level, which is why I'm suggesting that we don't solely rely on this and label it a representative sample when in fact, I'm not sure it is. So perhaps leaning on the comprehensive plan is judicious of us.
I think that's a good point. It is not it's not a statistically, scientifically constructed sample. That is absolutely correct.
And to your point, Cindy, if only 10% of the residents were outside the borough, but they all answered the questions in a similar way because of a single constituency, it could skew the results significantly, even though it's a smaller grouping. And I recognize that. So my question to you, I just want to, we're having a discussion, bring those things to the table, but my question would be, what areas of the comprehensive plan would be most important to you, since you mentioned it, that we should consider? You mentioned, sort of aging in place, but is that your position or sort of where you think we should go as a group?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's personally one of the issues that I'm most concerned about is aging in place. I didn't take the survey, so I didn't see how you asked those questions. The development of downtown, when we talk about community space for teens or supportive nonprofits, does the food bank have to be physically located at Sabine, or can it be somewhere in the community? It was the question, the confines of Narberth, or it's critical for some reason to be located at Sabine. Those are questions that I don't quite understand. When we're thinking about the uses of Borough Hall, I heard you mention the Narberth Community Theater. I would suspect that if we did in fact have a representative sample, we might see some of those themes emerge a little bit louder. It doesn't surprise me that Wonder Spring and childcare is a critical resource for our community. Does it have to be at Sabine, or does it have to remain in Narberth? Not that we have any control over that, but nonetheless, as an identified priority. I just think that this is one really important process, and you gave us some great data points, but we just need to be really careful in not labeling them representative.
Okay. Cindy, thank you. Fred, you're on.
Thank you. I had one question about the methodology. If the same person responded more than once, was that taken into account? I mean, there were multiple opportunities for people to respond. So I'm sure
Yeah.
some people took those opportunities.
So we did, when we downloaded the survey data, we scrubbed that to ensure that there were a few repeat IP addresses from members of the same household responding, which we indicated was absolutely appropriate. There was one instance of someone who had completed the survey when it first went out and then completed it again 3 weeks later, probably just forgetting that she had done it previously. And the responses between those two were very consistent. And so we just took one of them. And then if there were instances where someone responded to the survey and provided information in the open-ended portion, then, and we also got a letter from them with a lot of the same sentiment, we made sure to not be double counting that from the same person.
Okay. I guess my takeaway from seeing this is that there is a lot of focus on the potential uses of the property and community uses in particular, and not nearly as much focus on the financial aspects that we've been most concerned about. So, I mean, I'm seeing this as a mandate to imagine, spending money to better serve the community on this property, rather than dealing with the property in a way that keeps everybody's taxes lower. That's my takeaway from this.
Okay. Rob, would you like to go next?
To follow on what Fred's saying, and Mona mentioned this earlier, I saw in the slides a suggestion that we do some sort of economic modeling around, the trade-offs or the different possible scenarios. And so I'm wondering, in terms of next steps, if we are ready to engage in the RFP, or if we need to see some of the kind of economic trade-offs of the parameters that we're setting, because it does seem to me that the economics has been left out of the kind of public-facing process, the survey response.
Okay. Michelle, would you like to
just very quickly, I guess I'll follow up on what you just said, Rob. That's similar to what I guess I wanted to say from a different angle. I think I wanted to ask Beth and Kelsey, because they have experience in this area, whether they feel that what we have now is a sufficient amount and a sufficiently coherent and clear set of data to form an RFP that would actually possibly generate, responses that could meet our community's needs, or do we need to do more work before we do that? Because it's probably better to be clear and know that we've done the planning and that we have the direction, so that we get responses back that give us the capacity to compare apples to apples, that aren't all over the map, so that we don't put out an RFP that leaves potential partners looking at it saying, boy, there's a lot of question marks, and I'm not going to really put the time and ultimately the resources into sort of digging down and doing the work, because I need them to do the work on what they want. So I think my first question, and then I have another question after this, but my first question is sort of like Rob's, like, because we need to marry our community goals and our wishes and our wants and our really, really want to have with what's possible, because we need to marry that somewhere along the way in order to put out an RFP that will be productive. And I wonder, do you feel at this point you have enough information to do that, or is there more work we need to do to get to that point?
Well, what I would say is, based on what we've heard, reviewing letters, hearing your discussions as council people, and in all those, talking to the tenants, talking to folks who live close by, hearing a cross section of people at a public meeting, I feel as if we have a sense of what that input has told us is important. So I would not have a problem putting together language for a non-binding RFP that states that Wonder Spring would have to have continuous operations, that the site has to maintain, that the site plan has to have at least as much green space as there is currently, some of those issues that have come up, and that the challenge here is to try to plug that hole of the rents that are coming in to the budget, to the general fund. To me, that's what I'm hearing now. But you guys are the experts in Narberth. So if your reaction is, gosh, that doesn't seem to reflect what we're hearing from our constituents or my feeling as a leader in this community, then your knowledge is absolutely critical here. I think the key to any of this is that if you put out an RFP, you will make it non-binding. So you're really asking someone to weigh in. You have an issue, you have some priorities. You're asking someone to weigh in and say, can we solve this equation? The answer may be no. The answer may be maybe no.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I'm going with this. I wasn't at all suggesting, I hope I didn't sound like I was implying that I think I know something more about what the community wants than what you've already ascertained through this process. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm just saying, if we're going to put something out as a non-binding RFP saying, can you solve this puzzle? Can you solve this problem? I just want to make sure that we have a sense that this is a solvable problem. Because otherwise, if we kind of put something up that's not a solvable problem, maybe we need to do some more work on our own first. That was my only question, and so that's why I would rely on your expertise, because you can give us a sense of whether this is a solvable problem. This is something that there are ways for partners to participate in this. So that was the nature of my question. Then the other question, and I just asked, this is a very specific question. How do we deal with the fact that, notwithstanding that we all want to keep a childcare facility in Narberth, and somewhere on that property, it seems like a good location. How do we deal with the fact, as a municipality and planning for the future, that we have no control over their interest in staying in that or any other facility that's on that property? How do we plan for that? Because if, for example, Wonderspring decided they weren't interested in staying there because a better opportunity came up, or something very dramatic changed within that organization, I think that we need to be cognizant of the fact that we can't control what they do. So whatever plan we make needs to be flexible enough to accommodate that or other things, right? And so is that something that we're giving some thought to as we put together the RFP?
I'm just sort of thinking through this issue, because what we've been hearing is actually the direct opposite, right? That Wonderspring has been very anxious about this process because this is a good location for them. They serve a defined area. They have a constituency that is very dedicated, as we have heard from them in this process. So, I mean, normally the way that you deal with that in a real estate context is you ask for a long-term lease. So I would assume if somebody came in and responded to this RFP and was talking to Wonderspring, they would try to get a commitment from Wonderspring. They're not going to accept a year-long lease and have that risk. So that's typically how that's dealt with. It's very possible that somebody could come in and talk to Wonderspring and say, hey, do you want to be a partner in this enterprise
Michelle,
with us?
Yeah.
I think I hear where you're going, and I like what Beth is saying. And I also think if there was some unforeseen catastrophic scenario where for some reason Wonderspring ceased to function, you could, with a base of customers, you could do retail, you could do a leasing recruitment for a like use, and probably be able to find one pretty easily. Not seamlessly, but it would happen. Okay, so we went through all the council members, and what I'm hearing is a desire for Beth's team generally to use the data from this report to develop a preliminary, an RFP draft for us to review. I think, speaking with Beth and Kelsey, the timeline is probably possible to have that draft for our workshop meeting, which is the first Wednesday in February. for us to consider? Beth, if you disagree, please speak up.
I am sort of disagreeing because we want to do a
Okay.
good job on it, and just with our workflow, I would respectfully ask for a little more time.
Okay, so for the business meeting in February, 4 weeks, no problem. Don't worry about it. I'm always pushing deadlines. And then what I'd like to go back to this group for is a group discussion and a group sort of decision making about if there are other things that are outside of this data that we as a group agree should be included in this RFP. Sort of best question, you know your town, you know your people. But I want to make it clear that to Beth and Kelsey that while we're having this discussion, the opinions of any one council member about a certain thing are not a direction to do it. We'll summarize them and we'll sort of get a consensus as in terms of what we're looking for. The other thing I'll mention for the members of the public, because I see a raised hand, is we will roll into public comment at the conclusion of this presentation, and that will be an opportunity to comment. And I'll ask Beth and Kelsey just to stay on to hear those comments. If they are simple, factual answers or clarifications on the presentation, they will be provided. If they are more in depth, we'll take that information, but I can't guarantee a response this evening. So that said, okay, Mona, you had your hand up first, so I'll go to you.
Thank you. I agree that we should take into account the comprehensive plan in addition to the survey, but what I'm seeing is that the survey results and the comprehensive plan seem to be pretty aligned, because community character is a high priority is one of our big goals on the comprehensive plan. Community building, community activities, public spaces, all of those I think seem to be aligned. So, and you know, it looks to me like that's where we're going, that community open space and recreation are a big priority. So that leads me to a question for you, Beth, which is, you had mentioned that you've worked before on reuse of buildings in a place, and I can't remember if it turned into like an open market space or something, but my question is would it be typical? I think it might be less likely, but would it be typical for people to respond to an RFP with proposals that help support community recreation spaces, indoor or outdoor or pools? You know, I'm thinking RFPs typically might draw developers, but I'm wondering how often might you get an RFP where people who are interested in developing community recreation activities happen?
I think it would be most typical because one of the parameters here is a financial, revenue stream to the borough, that it would be a developer responding, but within the parameters you're asking for, they would understand that part of what they would need to provide or offer in their plan would be some of these things that are important and have been expressed in the plan. I think, let's say, and I'm just using this as a hypothetical because it was one use that was brought up. If the goal of the community is to have a pool or a community theater and you want to find an operator for it, that's sort of a different type of RFP. But what we're trying to, or at least what my understanding of what the borough is requesting is, we have this real estate asset that has capital needs. Is there a way to leverage it, still meet community needs, but allow us to continue to benefit from a revenue stream and and deal with that expense?
Could we draft both kinds of RFPs if you're saying that's a different kind of RFP for recreation?
Well, I think that really becomes that's really a discussion for you as a council and the revenue issue. I mean, you have to decide what the goal for you of pursuing that is, because it has a budgetary impact. So there's one budgetary impact, which is the capital needs of the building, right? That's one. A second budgetary impact would be any additional costs associated with providing significantly improved public facilities.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you answering that. Just for my personal opinion, I think that would be an important thing to do, to look at both kinds, because if we really want to talk about economic trade-offs, sustainability trade-offs, open space trade-offs, I think we should be looking at both kinds of RFPs. So just my opinion.
Bob?
I think that's a really interesting perspective, Mona. And I guess as I'm hoping that RES, that Beth, as you take into consideration the public input and our comprehensive plan and our budgeting issues and our long-term capital plan, that perhaps you might see 2 or 3 different pathways that requests for proposals might have. They maybe could be organized around several different themes. I mean, and maybe that's something that if you begin to draft, that we then have another discussion a little further down the road about kind of which scenarios seem to match best both the needs of the community, and also what I suppose they also have to match interested community partners. So if we have more than just one pathway, we might be able to entertain a greater number of options, perhaps. This may be pushing you beyond what this want to do, but I did like Mona's idea of like at least having 2 possibilities, if not more.
Cindy?
So Beth, just to use the example and kind of build off what Mona said. So you said some folks said Narberth Community Theater, like let's bring Narberth Community Theater back. Suppose this community organization doesn't have the bandwidth, the knowledge, the expertise to respond to the RFP. Is there some sort of matchmaking or coordination in your part or language in the RFP that would signal to developers or interested parties that there are small community organizations that are willing to partner with them? And I'm thinking, with a food bank, so suppose someone comes in and says, well, I'll donate half the space to these nonprofit organizations. It'll be a tax write-off, or I don't even know enough to create an example here. But I'm thinking, so we're clearly articulating in both the data you collected in the comprehensive plan of building a community place and space. But I don't think these community orgs in of themselves are going to be able to respond to this RFP. How can we help facilitate those conversations?
Well, Cindy, is that the purpose of the RFP, for like the community theater to respond? I mean, they're not going to be able to finance and engage in building a project, as you mentioned.
Right. So I guess that's my whole point. Maybe that goes back to Michelle saying, are we presenting something that is a problem that is not going to be fixed? And if this is really the data that we're responding to, in addition to the RFP, do we add a scenario where we look at, Narberth takes over the property for all these community uses that were highlighted in the data? Like, what's the cost of that? Because again, we're saying, is the food bank and Wonder Spring and the theater, are they all going to be?
Is your question, maybe, I don't know, because maybe I'm hearing my own question in your question, but part of what I'm hearing is, well, what's going to be in this for any developer? I mean, what?
Right.
But we're saying, we want you to give us outdoor and indoor community spaces, keep the revenue stream going, help us fix this building, and that's it. So give us an RFP for how you give us everything we want and you don't get anything. I'm not sure what we're going to get back to that.
Exactly. I guess that's my point. Like, no housing, no retail, no this, but we would like a theater, a senior center, community space, a food bank. I'm not sure what skin in the game anyone has here.
So I might be able to just drive a dollar figure. Matt, you might have it at your disposal, which is, what is the operating cost of running 201 Sabine? That is the expense side of the annual budget. And I'll give you a minute to look that up, but you can get that number. And basically imagine that somehow you finance a new building for free, right? And you're going to just have the use be for community organizations that are going to pay significantly below market rents. This is probably somewhere along the lines of how much it would cost the borough to operate that kind of facility on an annual basis. So with that said, pause on that thought and we'll go to Mona. Well, before I call on Mona, any other council members who have not yet spoken in this round? Okay, I see them ceding your time to you. Go ahead, Mona.
I'm happy to make a pitch while Matt is pulling together that information. I think if you dream big, things happen. And there's a lot of community members listening tonight who are organized and active. And I think, who knows, maybe some of these community members would be really interested in pulling together some type of nonprofit that could help to fund more recreational activities at that space and help to defray some of the costs. So I think, it's happened in many other places where reused buildings have been turned into cultural arts and community centers for, with all kinds of things that serve the community. So just throwing a pitch out there to anyone who's listening to this that, as Beth mentioned, we have in Narberth so many resources, so many talented people who would be great at writing grants and other things to pull together some kind of private public venture like that. Thanks, that's my pitch.
And I just wanted to tag on to Mona's pitch that when a developer joins with a community organization, in this kind of context, I think this has happened in other places. There are all kind of funding that's available to a project like that a for-profit developer wouldn't have available to them in just a simple development setting. Like there's state money, there's sometimes federal grants, there's sometimes special loans, there's sometimes county involvement. There's other ways that those kinds of partnerships do get off the ground and fund projects. And I don't think, Cindy, that the borough needs to necessarily be hands-on with that. I think this is the RFP idea is to see if there's some energy out there and interest and desire to make something happen in this site that's congruent with our community desires. And I think that's why RES is involved with this. I get scared, Cindy, as a council person and as a neighbor when I hear, oh, the borough wants to be more involved with managing this property. I think that's been problematic for the recent history, and I think that what we're trying to do is create an equitable way of creating resource for the community that gets us out of the management problem that we currently have.
That's not what I intended to say. What I'm saying, how do we support these small organizations like the theater, like the food bank, like all these other, to have some space and connection in this RFP? Or is it too overwhelming that they're not going to be able to participate? So how can Beth help the Narberth Community Theater?
I gotcha. I hear you. Yep.
Get a hand in the game. And whether it's and again, I don't want to be involved in that.
And I'll just for those two, let me throw out a specific, and then I'm going to punt it back to Matt. Narberth Food Bank is an organization that is, because of its the way it's set up, seems to be able to pay at the low end of market rents. That's a good thing, right? They're sort of in the game. The Narberth Community Theater would have a harder time because it needs a large space that is used maybe 40 hours a year, and it's more challenging to have that kind of space be available. Usually it's a church or religious organization that makes it available, and that's always a battle for resources because they use it for their own purposes too. And when you have a stage production, everything's frozen for a couple weeks. Anyway, I just want to throw out the uses are different. So it may be easier to support a group like the food bank or some other, like a senior center that would have the financial ability to pay something closer to market rents. And as much as I would like to see the community theater return, I think it would be harder to support that kind of space, though not impossible. Then to Matt, do you have a dollar figure?
I'm sorry. I know. Sorry for all the anticipation. I've been clicking furiously here. So the way that we get revenue submitted to the borough is that we get a check from Yentis, and they are the property managers for 201 Sabine. And they actually take out all of those operating expenses as part of their routine. And so
Okay.
I don't have that in my, I was looking at my accounting. We don't keep track of that as a separate line item in our budget. So you'd have to go through and look at
Right.
each one of the quarterly statements. All those quarterly statements are on the website. I'm not sure if Sean had ever gone through and done that. I seem to remember that he did. My VPN's not working tonight, so I can't find that spreadsheet. So
Well, let me do some
I seem
quick
to think it was
math
close,
for you.
close to
What's
between
the
300. I think seem to recall the operating was about close to 400 a year, between 350
what
and
was
400.
what's the rentable square feet
'Cause I looked at this
approximately,
too.
Beth or Kelsey? Yeah, thanks, Michelle. You're muted.
Yep, yes, I am. I don't have that right in front of me because we're in public participation mode, but if you give me a couple minutes, I can find it. 40 something, I believe.
I think it's
Okay,
45.
that's the number I need. 45. I think you're
45,000.
right. All right. Yeah, and Michelle, I think you're dead on. So, and not a surprise. Thank you, human calculator. I think that the total revenue for the site is probably around $675,000 a year, and that leaves the borough a $200 and something thousand a year profit. So, if you were to get a new building quote for free, you would probably have a carrying cost if you didn't want to charge any rent of about $500,000 a year, which is about 10% of the borough's budget. So, plus you'd have to make up the loss of the revenue, which you wouldn't be getting anymore. So now you're talking 15%. Okay, to Fred.
Yeah, I would like to see a more formal kind of financial analysis of what it would look like if the borough used the space primarily for community purposes. Like, let's say we handled the cleaned up the space or enlarged it, did whatever, did something with the building to make it more suitable for community uses. What's that going to cost the borough annually versus the status quo? Because I think we're kind of guesstimating here, and as you point out, we're not going to give it to Wonder Spring for free, right? I mean, we're going to continue to charge them rent. We're not going to give it to. There are still opportunities to make something there. So the question is, what's our best guess of what that would cost us? Because I think without that number, we can't really make effective judgments of this sort of comparison. It's very attractive in the abstract. It seems like a great idea. Hey, community space for everybody, but it's going to cost a lot of money. We should figure out what it would cost. We need to know that number. So I'd like to see that, next month. Some sort of best guess. It would help me make a decision.
Rob, I don't see. There you are. Would you like to weigh in on this?
So I guess, yeah. I mean, I like what Fred is saying, but when we started the process, we understood that there were these liabilities, and so I guess I am interested to see what Beth and her team could propose as a draft, because the whole idea is that there would be some way to offset the costs of adding community amenities. And I mean, if we're not going to do that, then then it's kind of different. We don't really need the RFP, because we have all sorts of questions if we could even afford that.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to suggest, this is a project, an educational project, right? I mean, we know that we have a liability. We know that we have an underutilized parcel of land in a town that has no land, and we're asking a lot of chicken and egg questions. And you heard from the community. What do you want to do, council? And the answer is we don't really know. We don't really know because we don't know what we can afford. We don't know what's possible. But we engaged with RES for the preparation of an RFP. And now I'm hearing conversation, which is, with all of the constraints, what kind of proposal could we even get, right? We want to meet these community goals, but we're concerned we might not get something good back. I'm going to go out on a limb here and suggest we just consider that we move forward with developing an RFP. When we put it out there, and we see what we get back with these criteria. It is not binding and it doesn't obligate us, but what it will do is it will give us a lot more information about what might potentially be out there before we shift gears towards sort of doing it all ourselves, or trying to understand what we could do sort of without a partner, right, on our own. And part of that RFP, we may even get some financials as to how the developer plans to make its money, and that will educate us in terms of what those site improvements might cost, what the operating costs might be, etc. Thoughts?
Yeah, I agree, Aaron. I think that, Beth has said enough that I feel like that RES feels like they have what they need to form an RFP. I agree, it would be a beneficial thing to put out. I want to make sure that that we formulate it in a way that we get back proposals, hopefully that really meet the community's needs. But I also just want to second, because I think I forgot to do that before, I would like to second what Cindy had said at the beginning of the discussion, which is that I think we also need to make sure that we are doing our due diligence and going through the comprehensive plan to make sure that we're reflecting the major goals of the comprehensive plan in any request that we put out.
And Aaron, I'd just like to say here to what Michelle said and to what you said. I agree with moving forward at this time. I also want to say just in general to the ideas of going in another direction, that several years ago, the council really struggled with a kind of ethical dilemma around who would be allowed, who would be permitted, who would be privileged with the use of the Sabine Avenue building. And the dilemma comes in that, who does the council choose? Does the council favor elderly people over children, or the community's children over the elderly, or people who are interested in arts over people who are interested in sports? And just saying that we want to have a broad community space available for everyone in the community then presents a whole kind of group of dilemmas that I don't know that any group of council members can really resolve on behalf of the taxpayers who would be subsidizing this community space for all of the different users. And so this became a problem at the time when the New Horizons group wanted to use the same space that the food bank wanted to use. And the only way the council could resolve the issue ethically, we felt at the time, was to say, well, we're going to fix the space at a market rate rent, and whoever, wants to use that space, whether it's New Horizons or the food bank or some other entity, that's the way we're going to resolve this ethical dilemma of who we favor for the use of that space. And I just wanted to add that in, Aaron, at this time for us to think on. Thanks.
Okay, Mona?
Sorry, I just want to clarify that I was not in any way suggesting that we do this on our own without a partner, or the borough, subsidize this. I was looking at this as a public-private venture and looking at the resources that we have in our community that private citizens, we already volunteer plenty of our time, right? So I was suggesting that private citizens who are really interested begin looking at resources and grant opportunities and private or not for profit ventures that could be the group that could subsidize this. And it's been done in so many places. So that's what I was suggesting. I don't think, I don't think that's something that the council should do. I think that's the private groups should submit, a proposal for that.
Right. Well, and I might suggest, one, I think other people may have been suggesting more of what, or less public-private partnership in some of their comments. It doesn't matter. But say a site was redeveloped and it had available space for rental, that is space that one of those outside organizations could rent to offer those services, right? As part of their, right? We're building the shell, we're building the infrastructure, and we're trying to put in place a fairly complex arrangement to make that happen in a way that burdens the taxpayer as little as possible. Unburdens the government with running a commercial rental facility, which has its own costs. I remember before the property management was well in hand, the borough office spent a considerable amount of its time just managing that property. calling the plumber, calling the electrician. So, okay, that said, are we comfortable with proceeding with the RFP, getting the results, and then sort of, holding our finger out to the wind and seeing what direction it might be blowing and considering it against our values and kind of going from there? I'm seeing some nods. I'm not hearing any great opposition. So Beth, I think you and Kelsey have your instructions to proceed, and we will see you in a month, and we will have a draft to discuss, and then just to talk about the process. We'll discuss it. If there are changes, those changes will be made, and then it will go out. And Beth, how long usually is an RFP out waiting for a response? What's a typical time frame?
3 months is usually a reasonable time.
So if this goes out in March, imagine there will be some comments that council will have around some revisions. If it goes out in March, we would expect to have results in June. And then with those results, various presentations, and then council would begin to say, are these appealing, and have conversations with the respondents to say, oh, I meant this, not that. And as we work our way towards the end of the year, that's sort of closer to decision-making time, probably September, honestly, because we're not going to make a big decision in summer. I'm imagining people have some overdue vacations that they're going to want to take when the weather's nice. Does everyone seem like a plan, like a timeline? Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you so much for coming. Please stay, and we're going to roll into public comment and see if there's any members of the public that have anything to add to your notes. All right, I will close agenda item 7, move on to agenda item number 8, public comment. I'm going to start with Mr. Goldberg because he has had his hand raised. Wow, it must be getting tired. It's been up for quite some time, but Mr. Lawrence Goldberg, if you'd like to go ahead and speak, 3 minutes, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Aaron. I'm here with my wife, Serena, and we are at 200 Savine. So we're directly across the street. We've been involved with the process whenever possible for the past few months. We appreciate the opportunity to voice our concerns. And I just want to say any comments I make are not in the spirit of, let's block things or let's slow things down. It's more in the spirit of let's find a good solution together. I've shared a lot of this with Aaron, but here's my list. I think it's really putting the cart before the horse to go out for an RFP at this point. Both my wife and I have been involved in many RFPs for, she works in the commercial space, I work in the public space, and a serious document, RFP document is several hundred pages and is specific. And the kind of conversations you're having now, you would have had over the period of years, a year or two, go through a process, reach a point where you narrow it down to 1 or 2 items. You know what those items are going to cost you. I think I heard, I was trying to keep notes, Rob say that you really need specific data on cost. Some of the questions in the questionnaire were just unanswerable. Like if you said to me, well, do you want a Hyundai or do you want a Tesla? The Tesla is probably going to cost more. Will you mind paying for it? Well, I don't know, because I don't know how much the Tesla is going to cost. I don't know how much the Hyundai is going to cost. I don't know the total cost of ownership. We don't know the specific cost of the building now, of maintaining it as it is. I know there's been discussion of about $200,000 to $250,000 net operating revenue that would have to be replaced by taxes, but that's not taking into account the capital investment that needs to be made that's been avoided for years and that needs to be made. What was that, $4 or $5 million? So that, that building as it is now may be a liability and a net loss, and it may be cheaper to rip it down and put green space there. We don't know that. We don't have price tags for any of these. We don't have specifics on the implications for any of these. And I think, in all fairness, it's great that the community is involved, but the fact that we're talking about, such wildly different things as skate parks and senior centers and, and some kind of commercial solution, I don't know what business the borough wants to be in. If you don't want to be in the realtor business as you're in now, then you need to decide first what your goals are. Is the goal to remove this liability in the most effective way possible, or is the goal to provide community services and then decide how much extra that's going to cost? But until you have that data, you really can't survey the community and ask them what they want. I mean, this is a community that is extremely underserved in terms of green space. So yeah, there may have been 20 kids on the surveys that said they want a skate park, or they, it may be great to have a pool. It may be great to have a senior center or a theater center. But there's inherently incompatible goals in this whole process. You're saying, we want to serve the community. We want to see what the community wants. We want to maintain ownership. We want to get revenue, and we want to go out for an RFP. So if you move ahead, and if you put an RFP, it's not going to be a serious exercise. You're going to have something very general. You're going to say, we have this space.
All right.
Give us your ideas, but you don't have any of the data yet. So I would encourage you to take a little more time and to get some of the data and to formulate, try to whittle it down to
Mr. Goldberg, I'm going to call time. But thank you for your comments. Is there another member of the public? Carol Marie, go ahead.
Yes, please. I would like to say, first of all, I think going forward with an RFP at this time shows that this council is not listening to the residents. Now, with that being said, we need to go to a next step. 20% of the borough responded to this survey during 3 weeks of an open survey during a December holiday season, when we are working with the stress of working at home, schooling our kids. That's too short of a time. I have said many times, what I feel needs to be done is a survey needs to be given to each household, because whatever happens to this property affects every single household. People do not know what's going on. They're not engaged because we're having Zoom meetings. We're not having in-person meetings. Now, the transparency, as Lauren said, there is so little transparency, because on one hand, the council says the income does not keep up with the expenses and that the building is costing us money. Then on the other hand, the borough's been using this building as a piggy bank, taking the money instead of putting it toward capital repairs and using it toward the borough the borough budget, which the borough being in a pickle, a financial pickle, as Bob said, that's your doing. So why do we want to sell one of our biggest assets when we need this asset? We do not have enough green space, especially with all of the development that's going on. So I really think that what we need to do is have a larger survey going out to the people of the borough, every single resident, ask the residents, and then get a larger response of what people want. 435 people is not enough to change the borough with any plans for this property.
All right, thank you. Anyone else from the members, any other members of the public? If you want to unmute yourself, state your name and address, and we'll try not to have a collision.
Hi,
Aaron. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, my name is Joe Heffern. I'm an attorney. I represent the Savine Coalition. I'm with the law firm of Rogers Castor. One of the reasons I'm here tonight is the Savine Coalition represents a group of community residents, businesses. I actually sent you, Aaron, a letter earlier introducing myself. I appreciate the opportunity.
We did all receive it. Yes.
Thank you. But I think what I'm interested in hearing, and I think a lot of the members of the group is what exactly is the RFP going to look like? I mean, I think Lawrence raised a lot of good questions with his experience with prior RFPs, and I'm just curious, and I think the members are too. What exactly is going to be in this RFP? And maybe this is a question for Ms. Beckett, but I think that before moving forward with an RFP, just page-wise, what is going to be asked in this RFP?
Okay. Hold that. let's get the rest of the comments, and then we'll see what we're capable of answering in this public comment section of the meeting. Dennis? Or you're on mute, sir?
All right, thanks. So the scope of the engagement with RES was to help formulate this RFP. So is it unrealistic for them to pivot to something else? I'm not saying what that something else is.
Could you state your name and address?
Oh,
just
sure.
For the record.
Dennis Callan, 27 Narbrook Park.
Thank you.
So we're at an impasse here. I'm not offering a solution. My question is more, the scope of the engagement was to create this RFP, but we're at a point where some residents oppose you proceeding with that RFP. Where does that put RES and the fact that the borough has spent money for this engagement? I'm just curious about that. And if they're able to pivot to something else or put the project on hold out of consideration for, I assume we've paid half of what we owe them, and the other half will be given to them at the conclusion of the evaluation of the RFP. So that's my question is, are they able to hold if you decide as a council not to proceed with the RFP?
Any other members of the public? Hearing none.
Aaron, will you allow council members to respond or are engaging
I
in
am
discussion
going to,
based on the comments that we've heard?
I'd like Beth to respond just generally, if you could, what the RFP is going to look like. I think, that's a question we all would like to hear your answer on.
Sure. I mean, typically an RFP for a site or a property is going to describe the property, describe the goals for redevelopment or acquisition of the property or leasing of the property, is going to direct the potential respondents to other sources of information, and potentially as you're talking about your comprehensive plan, and note that they should be considered in their response. Detail whether this is a competitive effort, a binding effort, a non-binding effort. I mean, one thing to think about, we've used the term RFP because that's what we were retained to do, but it may be, maybe from what I'm hearing, maybe it's a request for expressions of interest or for qualifications. I mean, that might be something that we can think about over the next month if there's anxiety over a specific development proposal, if that's how people are hearing this, maybe it can be more broad. But either way, regardless of what it's called, it's non-binding. So we would also work with the solicitor of the borough to make sure that language in that document is clear and meets any kind of Commonwealth borough statute requirements for this type of solicitation.
Okay. Thank you. Michelle, did you have something specifically, or actually Beth, while you're here with us, no, I'm gonna hold it. Sorry. Michelle, did you have a specific comment? Because I think the best time, I don't want to make this too interactive.
I do have a specific comment, if it's okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Because it reflects what I started off with, where I started off expressing skepticism that we were ready to put out an RFP. Saying, I think based on what I'm hearing, we don't have a coherent set of goals that would make sense, that would attract the kind of proposals that we'd be able to, maybe any, or any proposals that we could use, make apples to apples comparisons, sort of have an understanding. I think that it's likely that any developers who made proposals would be making very different kinds of assumptions, because I don't think we've taken the time to work out our goals specifically. So my sense, and I said it at the beginning, was that it was premature. It didn't seem like anybody was picking up on that. I don't like to be the squeaky wheel all the time. So I kind of thought, all right, well, maybe we've worked out enough. All right, maybe I don't know everything. I will say I had a conversation with somebody who's in this space back in October, somebody in our community who had sort of watched the presentation in October and said they didn't think we were articulating the kinds of things that would make sense. He didn't think we were taking an approach that would bear fruit for the borough. That essentially we didn't have enough community planning, charretting, financial analysis, or specificity. And so I just wanted to say, I appreciate all the community members, all three of you who spoke up. I heard you, and particularly Mr. Goldberg, what you said resonated with me because it's what I've already heard. And if it were up to me, I would put this on hold and maybe at our workshop meeting, because I know where this is going a little bit long, talk about whether there's a way to get to that level of specificity. Or alternately, as Beth suggested, maybe don't try to form an RFP, maybe do something that is different, like just a request for interest, or, I forget what you termed it. But based on my understanding of what an RFP would require, I don't feel that we've really formulated a set of goals or done what we need to do to get to the point where we can put one out that would be useful.
Aaron, I'm
Thank
not
you,
sure if
Michelle.
you're opening this up to discussion again or not, but I prefer we not revisit the question. My understanding is that we're asking that the purpose of this next step is to actually define those goals, and that we're asking.
Yeah, I don't think we're reopening the question.
Goals based on the data that we have, and then we can do an assessment and have another discussion about the goals based on seeing seeing this in black and white in a text.
Michelle had an opportunity to respond. I think we're not reopening, and I don't want to reopen the whole floor to every council member.
Thank you.
At this point, okay. Thank you. All right, now we will close public comment. Thank you so much, and we will move to 9A. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? And thank you, Beth and Kelsey. I think you guys can go. Matt, yes, sir.
Sorry, Aaron, you jumped over item number 7. We're going to have a discussion item on planning commission candidate interview process.
I am sorry. I got so into 201 Sabine. You're right. Okay, let's go back to agenda item 7, planning commission interview process. Council members, I am open. I think some of you have ideas. And we have how many applicants right now? We had one withdraw their name. Matt? Well,
I'm not sure. I was looking here.
So in the past, we have done interviews, speed interviews, sort of 10 minutes each, where we would meet an hour ahead or at a specific time that we would set up. And these are public session interviews. So this would be a public meeting on Zoom, and either ask questions or ask people to have a statement and just sort of respond to their statement with a question or two about what they might bring to the community. And that was how it was done previously. I don't know if council members have a different idea of how we want to do it. I think having interviews is good. It's nice to put names to faces, especially since we will not be in the same meetings together, but they do represent us on some very important issues. And at the same time, also that we give everybody a fair shake, not just people that we know. So, council members, there are six people. So he's messing with me now. There are 6 candidates.
6, but one said that they weren't.
Oh, so there's 5 candidates.
Yeah.
So if we did 10 minutes each, which is pretty quick, you get them in and get them out. We could do it we could schedule an hour ahead of a meeting. We'll look at the committee meetings and see when that might be possible. It may be on a different night. and we can have some interviews. What do you think? Is everyone comfortable with that format? Okay. Matt, can you take a look? We can get to this under new business when we get a little later in the meeting. Can you see where we might slot in, if it's possible, prior to a workshop, the upcoming workshop or upcoming business meeting? I don't think this is urgently urgent. I heard from Mr. Spear, he's actually feeling fairly engaged in some of the things that are in front of the Planning Commission for the next 2 or 3 months. So I think we're good on that, but I don't think we want to go too much longer than that because these people put their names in and they're not expecting to wait 6 months to be appointed. So.
Okay, so excuse me, just to be clear, you're looking for an additional meeting before the workshop meeting?
Or take a look at the, either we would meet an hour earlier, or if the agenda coming up for that meeting is looking light, we could do it, an hour of interviews from 7:30 to 8:30, and then sort of conclude the meeting without running to 11 o'clock at night. That would be.
Yeah, I like that idea with process. I believe my philosophy is that the workshop meeting is where those types of discussions and interviews and presentations should happen, and then action then taken the following 2 weeks. So I say, if council wishes to have it at that workshop meeting, I'll put that on that agenda, and we can build that agenda around that as the focal point if you so choose.
Aaron, can I hop in here? I'm sorry, you're asking for an hour before the meeting for the interviews. Do you want to take the F&A slot? We have an hour and a half slot.
Well, that's what I'm throwing out
we'll
there.
speed F&A from 6 to 6:30. Have candidates come in 6:30 to 7:30.
Well, that's before the business meeting. I was hearing before
workshop. Yeah, okay.
meeting.
We honestly, I hear what you're saying, Matt, about process and such, but if that's the hour we can use from an operational standpoint, I am comfortable with that, and giving everybody a month to get their calendars in aligned.
You feel as though that will be sufficient time for council to make a decision for those appointments the same night?
I think we would have a discussion following, it would be an agenda item on the action items to make an appointment, and there would be a motion if there was a sense of who it might be, and if not, council can delay it to a future meeting.
Okay, very good.
Okay, all right, well, we can work that out. Thank you for helping me with my agenda. All right, 9A, a motion to approve the minutes.
I move that Borough Council approve the minutes of the December 2nd, 2020 workshop meeting and December 16th, 2020 business meeting of Borough Council.
Is there a second? I give
second.
it to Rob. Yep. All in favor? Aye. The meetings are approved. Heard no discussion. 9B.
I move that Borough Council approve the schedule of bills for the general highway aid, sewer, solid waste funds, and authorize the borough manager to pay all bills.
A second.
Or second. Seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. It's unanimous. 9C.
I move that Borough Council approve the 2021 meeting schedule for borough boards and commissions per the attachment.
Second that.
Seconded by Vice President Weisbord. Any discussion?
Maybe just an ask that perhaps we could put these on the Narberth calendar, throw it up on social media so folks just can make note on their own calendars.
Yeah. And Mr. West?
Thank you, Cindy. You stole my thunder. I was going to say the same thing. I just
Sorry.
wanted to say no, it's all good.
I saw you nodding. You were bobbleheading it.
I just wanted to say thank you to Michelle Carroll for spearheading this and coordinating with all of our boards and commissions to get these dates hammered out. Once these are passed tonight, I'm going to have Michelle send them out on the flash and put them on our calendar, and we'll be all good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? See none. It's unanimous. 9D.
I move that Borough Council adopt Ordinance 1028, an ordinance amending the Narberth Borough Zoning Code, Chapter 500, to amend front facade requirements, fence regulations, zoning hearing board powers, notice requirements, and parking credit entitlements, building height and first floor height requirements, frontage and width requirements for commercial and mixed-use buildings, site plan standards when multiple buildings are on a lot, non-conforming regulations and to provide new and amended definitions per the attachment.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
I'll give it to Councilor Pananopoulos. Thank you. And any further discussion?
I mean, I'd just like to
Yes.
say that, Aaron, I'd just like to say that after we adopted the form-based code in April 2016, the council asked any residents who had concerns or special, any concerns about the new law to write to the council and the planning commission. And a group of about 45 issues were surfaced, many of which have been addressed by the planning commission already. And during that time, the planning commission continued to read closely the ordinance and also had additional experience with new development that had occurred in interim. And I think they've been working really, really hard, along with some other council members, to iron out a lot of wrinkles and to refine the code in a way that will continue to make Narberth more and more livable into the future. And I just wanted to put that historical context in place here. This is the work of many years on the part of the Planning Commission.
Thank you. Any other discussion for council members? All in favor? All right. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Mr. Bressi, please convey our thanks and congratulations to the members of the Planning Commission. And also, I'd like to thank the members of the community who, to Bob's point, took the time to read this dense document and bring their feedback and comments to the Planning Commission. I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that we have the finest point pen of any zoning code in the state of Pennsylvania. And that is hundreds, if not thousands of hours of expert work, volunteer work from your Planning Commission. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all of you. You've contributed a lot to the conversations we've had this last year. So thank you.
Great. All right, 9E.
I move that Borough Council appoint Borough resident Emily Schreiner to the Narberth Borough Human Relations Commission for a 5-year term expiring on 12/31/2025.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, thank you. All right, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor? All right, motion passes, thank you. 9F, I think this one goes to you, Mr. Bush.
Yeah, I move that Borough Council approve the 2021 plans for the Narberth Cooperative Gardens per the attachment.
Okay. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Shax. Any discussion? Everyone saw the proposal. All in favor? Aye. Okay, motion passes. None opposed. 9G, back to Finance and Administration.
Okay, I move the Borough Council approve a lease amendment for Filtration tenant at 201 Sabine Avenue per the attachment.
Seconded by Bob. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. None opposed. I did get your chat, Michelle, and I'm going to grab you when we get to 11. 10A, Mr. Manager, do you have a report?
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't have a formal written report this evening. However, I did want to bring to council's attention the budget versus actual reports that were added late this afternoon to the meeting packet, as well as the cash fund balances. I'm happy to report that the final balance for the end of 2020, we came out, well, it depends. I was really happy that it looked as though we cleared about $74,000 for the year. However, due to a wrinkle in payroll, We actually had to process the first payroll of 2021 on December 31st. So that skewed our numbers just a little bit, but we're still good. We cleared just over $24,000 for 2020. So hats off to everybody in borough administration, just watching the bottom line, and just really appreciate how staff has been managing that, as well as a former manager metric. So that concludes my report. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Solicitor.
Just wanted to report on the 3 ordinances that I was tasked with drawing, just to make sure council's aware of what's forthcoming. One is something I recently submitted to the Public Health and Safety Committee for review for their meeting upcoming regarding the dog barking nuisance provisions, and making some fine tunings to that to make that a little bit more clear and acceptable to council. The second, to the same committee, was asked to review some comments and some letters from the Shade Tree Commission, propose some ordinance changes to the Shade Tree Commission and the chapter regarding trees. I'm in the middle of doing that right now. They're proposing, I want to say starting, but more utilizing a permitting program in certain aspects, which requires me to have some contacts with the borough office, with Mr. Harmon. Now that he's back, I need to reach out to him, and Mr. Walsh, just to kind of get a better feel for the administration of that, to make sure that that is an effective ordinance that works with administration. But that should be ready for the Public Health and Safety Committee for discussions. The third is more of a comprehensive ordinance regarding the stormwater ordinance, obviously a significantly important ordinance, or the chapter for the borough. This started when we were tasked with changing the the scope of the review projects about what gets reviewed. Mr. Bush is something that he brought up. It's a great idea. It's something we're going to mess around with and get the language in there that makes it a more up-to-date review process for the projects that need to be reviewed. But in the meantime, there's also a need to do a comprehensive revision to prepare the ordinance for 2022, so even though it's far off, to be in line with the MS4 permit requirements. So we thought, instead of going through this process twice, we'll just kind of make all the changes together. So we'll have one revised stormwater ordinance that will address what's required for us to be compliant with MS4, to address these issues that council wants to see regarding the size of projects that get to be reviewed, but also take care of a confusing issue that we're still trying to figure out why it's in the code, that's broken up into 2 different parts: a Lower Marion watershed area, and also I think it's Dobie Creek watershed area. According to our engineer, we're not sure why there needs to be 2, and we could just sort of proceed with 1 unless there's something that comes up, again, which will make the code easier and shorter for everyone involved. So that may take some time to put together, but still, I would hope to have it done next month. So I'll be working on those ordinances and getting those back to council for review and discussion. So thank you.
Thank you. Monthly reports have been filed. Any comments for the good of council? Okay, we'll move to new business. Councilor Pananopoulos, so you had messaged me about RES starting work on the RFP. So we have already authorized to engage RES to do the survey, community outreach, and prepare an RFP. So I think the question is if there is a consensus on council to stop work on the RFP, or to ask them to redefine their scope of work. That under new business might be an opportunity to do that. Maybe I'm reading too deeply into sort of what we've already authorized them to do, but Michelle, you want to take the floor? Yeah. Tell me your thoughts.
That wasn't my thought. I suppose that's a possibility. I'm not necessarily interested in changing the scope of their work. I'm more concerned about the timing of it. While I understand that we did put out, we've had some meetings, we've done a survey, we've seen a preliminary summary of that survey data. We haven't seen the data itself. We don't know a whole lot of detail about it. My sense parallels what I guess he's not here anymore, Mr. Goldberg said, and what I had heard from another person who works in nonprofit development who has been following this process. We are not specific enough with our goals, with our wishes for this property at this time. I don't think we have, I think we have a fairly vague sense of some general things we'd like. I don't think we have enough specificity. I don't think we have an economic analysis right now to put out. I don't think we know what we're asking for. Do we want, for example, if we had public space, is that something we would be asking somebody else to maintain? Would we be wanting to maintain it? Are we looking at long-term leasing, short-term leasing, selling part of the property, maintaining ownership over everything? I don't think that a third party is going to come in with a proposal if we don't have more clear ideas about what we're looking for, what we can put into that, and what we're looking to get out of it. And I may be wrong. But once RFP does their work that we've paid for, then if we want them to redo it, we have to pay them again. So as much as I have been pushing to make decisions on 201 Sabine since the day I got on council, and everybody knows it's a high priority for me, because I know we can't stay in this sort of holding pattern forever because of costs, because of finances, because of uncertainty. I wish we could just I know we don't have time on the schedule to do it tonight, but I wish we could take the time to step back, maybe schedule some time to have additional meetings or discussion, maybe with RES, maybe just council. I don't know exactly right now. My sense is that we are not ready. And so we didn't have I know we talked about it before. I know we sort of had a consensus. Then we had some community comments. They reflected my strong fears that we are moving too fast on this project right now, and that we'll regret it. We won't get back quality proposals based on what we're putting out. And so I would like to at least ask for a vote, an up or down vote, whether we want to move forward right now or just take this up in a month after we've had some time to look at the data and give it some more thought before we give it to RFP RES to have them actually start the work of drafting. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I'm just uncomfortable right now with moving forward.
Aaron, in light of Michelle's comments, I'd like to propose something.
Well, hold on. Let me call Mona, and then I'll get to you, Bob. Sorry, you're on mute.
So I do have a question. And I think that was a good question that Dennis Callan raised, was what if we do put it on hold? It's sounding to me also like we're not ready. We don't have enough financial information or goals set up. Is there a time limit on our work with RES?
I don't believe that.
I don't recall that. I don't recall that in our contract. Okay, that was just a question.
Okay, Bob.
So now I have a comment and a proposal, but I guess I could be wrong, Michelle, but it's my sense that what RES is doing is that they have engaged in an economic analysis, and that they do have some very, very specific ideas about what they think we want to ask for. But we don't, just as the attorney, Joe Heffron asked, he said, he was saying, we'd really like to know what this RFP is going to look like, and I guess I felt, I heard myself say, I'd kind of like to know what this RFP is going to look like too, because I think there's a lot of decisions that actually are being made on our behalf by RES that will be revealed to us, that will come to fruit, show that will be revealed to us in the RFP draft. Now, maybe what I'd like to propose is Aaron, is that we go back to our RES and say, what we'd like to see is, what we'd like to do is have a working discussion with you around each and every specific item, each and every specific assumption that you've made about what we want to do here. So, and we'd like to see your economic analysis. So we'd like to go into a little bit of, we'd like to see what kind of sausage you're making and how you're making it before you actually draft this as a fully written RFP to present to council and the public. And Michelle, does that begin to address your concern?
I think it would be prudent to do that before we have them actually sit down and draft an RFP. I really do, at a minimum, and see where we are. And that, I mean, it could be the case that we have that discussion and we sit down and we find out, oh yeah, they've got this all worked out. They just weren't kind of like not, or
Right.
or maybe not, or maybe it's like we really haven't given them enough to go on.
Yeah, because we don't know. They may have nailed it. Like, so what you're saying.
I'd like to do that
know.
check before we
Yeah.
have them actually draft the RFP that is part of our scope of work. Yeah.
So it's not like an either or. It's just like it's a step towards the final product.
Right.
That we could do with them. Maybe Aaron, you could appoint like a small working group to go meet with them, perhaps.
I think that I hear what you're saying. I'd be happy to have a conversation with Beth tomorrow and, what can you present to us at the workshop meeting that gives us more of a framework to understand what you plan to put together with the rest of your with the rest of your time, right? No one's really sure what this work product is going to look like or whether we feel it has the right beats. And it's sort of chicken and egg, because until she writes it and you look at it, how can you know? And we're not, honestly, none of us are experienced enough to look at sort of an unfinished work product with the eye of a professional and say, I know what this is going to look like when it's finished. But we also feel like, I'm hearing, we would like a little more information.
Yeah, I think reassurance.
Am I hearing everybody?
And Aaron, I'm sorry, I'm trying to raise my hand, but I'm getting lost in my background.
Yeah, I see. I noticed that. Yeah.
I'm not comfortable moving forward with an RFP with the data points that we have. And we have that. When we're talking about community goals, a comprehensive group worked on that for, nearly 2 years. I would really like Beth and RES to come back and say, we looked at your comprehensive plan. We looked at the themes from the comprehensive plan and we're mapping them to the data that we have. And we're finding, we missed some respondents in our surveys and our groups. Seniors we didn't hear from. Perhaps then we move and do a focus group with seniors. I'd really like them to use.
Well, let me ask a question. How much more, in terms of dollars, would council like to spend? I'm just throwing this out there as a discussion topic to sort of get to enough data that people feel comfortable. Because I'm hearing from a couple people, there's questions that weren't answered or asked directly in the survey, or that, right, to your point, that the survey, you want more information about who actually responded to make sure that it's stratified properly. Thoughts? Because that's money. I mean, they're not just gonna do it for free. We can do it.
I think we have a lot of data. They have a lot of data, I should say, beyond the question, beyond the public data that they presented to us. They've looked at our community beyond just the surveys that they've done.
Well, and maybe I would like to see that then, because
this is the point, Aaron. This is why I requested perhaps like some side working group with RES, so that we can get some confirmation, we can get some questions answered about, check some boxes.
Cindy, I don't know that the data that Bob is referring to is sort of hard data in Excel, but it is sort of coming to multiple meetings and hearing where we are as a group, and them using their professionalism to fill in the gaps based on where we'd like to go as a community, the comprehensive plan, what the planning commission is, where we are as a council. And I think the only way you're going to see that is if you get a work product from them, right? And it's going to I deal with this at work. You want to hire a graphic artist and you have to pay them by the hour, but how do I know that I'll like what they make? And the answer is you don't, but you still have to pay them.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron, because we really can't evaluate the direction they want to take us until they show us the direction they want to take us. And that's why it's, as you said, Aaron, a chicken and an egg conundrum. And I mean, these processes can go on forever. And at any juncture, we're going to have there's going to be public concern about any particular specific detail or economic analysis. We can get the most perfect economic analysis, and there's going to be several members of the public who are going to say, well, I don't agree. Like, those numbers don't make sense to me. And we'll hear opposition. I think this is why, I mean, the council actually has to provide some leadership. And I think Michelle's pointing to that in the need to basically just double check and make sure that they do have a good sense of what we need.
I think we do
can
need
double-
to provide leadership, more leadership. I agree completely with the way you just phrased that, Bob. I think that's our job. I think we need to do that. I think we can't put out an RFP that says, this town wants something, maybe a pool, maybe a skate park. I don't know. They like the outdoors and they really make it environmental, and childcare is really important. And, just tell us what you can do. Like that's not going to fly. Now, they may have some very specific bullet points. Like, we are looking for a proposal for 50% outdoor space to be managed by the borough. And, this, that, and the other thing, we are looking for either I don't even know enough to talk about it. I'm like you, Cindy, we're looking for a partnership for community indoor space that partners with community organizations to include, a nonprofit organization such as the food bank, an arts organization. This community wants these goals met, give us proposals for that. But I think it really needs to have a fair degree of specificity. And and it could be that that's what RES is planning, but I haven't heard anything yet that would suggest that.
So what I might suggest, I'll speak to Beth, and we maybe can get more of a bulleted list of, an outline of what that RFP is going to look like.
I think that might be a great
maybe
first
she
step,
can maybe that is what will come to the business meeting. I don't know what her timeline is, but I'll speak to her. And then we could say sort of thumbs up on these goals, or we want to change X or Y or Z, or we think you have too many in here and we want to hone it down, and we're willing to sacrifice having all 7 things because we recognize we can only realistically demand 3, right? Something like that. And then spend the rest of the hours having it fleshed out with a little more confidence that what we're going to get is what we're expecting. Keeping in mind, there are still hours reserved in this contract for revision of a draft, right? It's not that she presents an RFP and either, we like it, great. And if we don't, she's out of here. But I do agree, it's not going to be deliver an RFP and we want to change everything and she'll just do it for no more money. That's not going to happen.
I think at least having a bullet point list of what are the major parameters of this project that we're putting out there. What does the project look like with some specificity? I think that would really help. Yeah.
All right. We will. So I don't know that we need a vote or a motion, but we'll take care of that. And I will send an email out between meetings, just getting everyone informationally sort of where that conversation landed. And we'll go from there. Okay. Let me just take a note here. Any other new business?
The NBA grant and potential council action, Aaron?
Go ahead.
So the NBA has utilized the funds that we've resolved to give last year. They've used the remaining $6,000 for this year and created an economic support for COVID-related projects grant matching system, up to $1,000 to be reimbursed for any Narberth registered business. And we'll put that working document for everyone to see. But the ask here tonight is, and the recommendation of FNA is, can the office waive the permit for any NBA grant project?
Waive the permit fee.
Yes, I'm sorry. Waive the permit fee. That's an important. Waive the permit fee for any NBA granted project.
So I'm gonna, before we even have a motion, punt that to the solicitor, who can just tell us sort of legally what we can do and what the method might be to do it.
What is an NDA project?
The Narberth Business Association.
I know, but
sure, I can
what
read
kind
it.
of projects are we talking about for?
Sure, I can read it. This first one's kind of important, and I'm reading this right from the document. Any Narberth business can request one of these grants from the NBA as long as they agree to remain compliant with local and state COVID safety regulations and mandates. The grant program is designed to be used for infrastructure projects, including but not limited to tents, barriers, awnings, heat lamps, and other equipment to better facilitate other outdoor shopping or dining. The award of the grant does not imply permission from the borough to build or revise any structures, applicable borough zoning and permitting process, if any, must be followed.
So if I'm a restaurant and I want to build an awning, I can get $1,000 to help offset my costs from the business association. And the question is, would the borough be interested in waiving the permit fees on that construction project? To you, Mr. Solicitor.
Yeah, if council wants to resolve to waive those fees, those are fees that are set up by council. So that would be something council could do.
And by resolution or by a motion?
I mean, I think that you could probably do it by motion if you're exact enough as to what you're referring to here. So if you're going to tie this to something where, you know, the borough office knows exactly what they're doing and they have some limitations on that, you could probably do it through a motion.
Okay.
And what I'm hearing is that it's if the NBA says, hey, this is someone where we've given a grant, that's when this would apply.
Right. So a motion could be worded that for commercial construction projects which have received a grant from the NBA, the first $2,000, you know, the permit fee would not apply for the first $2,000 of construction. That would be sort of the amount that the NBA gives plus a matching amount. I'm throwing this out as an option. And that, you know, if it was a $5,000 project, $3,000 of it would have a fee applied to it. And the first 2,000 would be exempt, or could be the whole project is exempt if it gets a grant. That's for council to discuss here. Any thoughts?
It's simpler if
Fred?
we say the whole project. I mean, I don't know how much of a problem that's going to be. I think it's a lot easier if we just say
the only issue there would be, say I'm going to renovate, you know, a whole lot of stuff, has one piece that is an awning, and I'm just going to go down to the borough office and file one application for my construction project and get out of all my permit fees.
Can we do a limit or a maximum of or up to X amount?
Sure.
And I would defer. I don't know what that amount should be.
Could we also put a time limit on it, since I think the goal of this is to help our local businesses through the economic downturn? Could we put, I mean, who knows how long the money will last, but if it's there and no one takes it, could we put a time limit on it for a year or something?
I'd recommend doing that. And again, you can always extend it if need be.
So Cindy, what's the maximum NBA grant that's available to a business?
$1,000.
So why don't we make, you know, the permit limit, say up to $2,000 worth of construction? You know, that the permit fees waived for $2,000 of work under that grant. Does that make sense, given that?
Yeah, you know what? I would defer to Matt on this one because I don't have a sense of how much permits cost. You know, how much.
Mr. Permit, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I think that having these discussions about the exact amount of permits, how much we should waive, is premature. The discussions that we had in finance and administration was that, you know, this was an idea that I brought up as a way for the office to support this effort. And I made a point in the committee to make sure that so long as it is specifically attached to the grant program, I would be okay with waiving that fee. I have not seen yet a fully instituted or developed grant program yet. I know there was a document that Ed Ridgway shared with me. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. We talked about some things in finance and administration about creating a more structured grant program. I'm more in favor of having a more structured program, which then links directly to those permits. We're not talking about a lot of money. We're not talking about, you know, it's not going to break the bank. So long as permits are submitted, that's, you know, and Kevin Walsh and I've discussed this also because it came up with the Greeks building their structure for the winter time, that, you know, we're not interested in the fees so much as getting those plans to make sure that they are up to code for public health and safety reasons. So I think that, you know, I don't know. It's impossible for me to, you know, to say how much we should waive, but without having that grant program fully instituted.
So I would say I think it's unrealistic to ask the NBA right now to come up with a highly developed grant program for $1,000 because businesses are in the trenches. I mean, they're surviving day to day. You know, I am comfortable as FNA with the document that we were given to us and letting them oversee that process, us stepping back from that. We did ask that receipts and reimbursement be documented as part of the grant program. I'd hate to see us paralyze them with requiring more than what they have submitted. And again, I don't know what a permit would be for like the kind of lean-to or putting an awning on, or for example, La Petite Matron would like a tent, you know, to put out so their customers don't get rained on as they stand outside for takeout.
So our current permit structure is 3% of the total cost of a project plus $50.
Okay.
So Matt and Cindy, given that the purpose of this grant program is to support businesses that are impacted by COVID in the short term, why don't we just do something very simple, like say to the first 5 or the first 8 applicants who would have received money from the NBA for this purpose would have their permit fee waived, so that it really goes to the immediate short-term needs of people who are ready and willing and are in action, so that we're helping the people right who need it most.
Mr. West, what do you think about that?
I even think that's a little too complicated. You know, I appreciate your simplicity and the idea of making it simple. And I'm going to see your bet and raise you one and say, I just think just all of them. You know, I don't like having the first 5, because then it become competition, and I'd have to play the role of Solomon and say, okay, this one was the 5th one.
So anyone, but keeping in mind that there's a fuse on this, like with a time limit, say like anyone between now and June 1st or something that comes in with an application is
I believe the spirit of this grant program is to be short term. Right. So we're not talking about a long-term program, and we talked about it being revisited if needed. I really don't see this as being a major stumbling block to just waive all the permit fees for any project that is associated with this grant program. That would be my recommendation. That would be the most simple approach.
I agree, Matt. And, I think we might be trying to problem solve for a problem that we don't have, so if Andrea wanted to say, well, wow, I'd like an awning to cover my patrons from the rain as part of the COVID-19, but I'm also going to completely rehab the inside and redo the bathroom. I don't think that our businesses are going to manipulate the permitting process, and perhaps maybe we wait and solve that problem if it happened, and not again paralyze the project.
Another option that we might have would be to let what happens happen, to establish our desire to help these businesses, and we could review it at the end of the granting, and we could make a motion at that point to refund permit fees for those businesses which participated, and then we will have less what ifs, because we'll know what. Okay. I'm hearing no action tonight. We're just gonna think about this. I'm seeing some nods.
No, I think we should can we, I would like to make a motion that we waive any permit fees associated with an NBA recipient of a COVID relief grant.
And I'd like to second that with a friendly amendment.
Go ahead, Bob.
That permits that are issued between today and I would say May 15th or June 1st, something like that.
You okay with that, Cindy?
Yeah, we could give folks a little time. I mean, they're just getting this word out, so.
Or June 1st.
How about June 1st, as suggested? Cindy, you okay with that?
Sure. I mean, we can extend that.
We can always extend it later, but right now, between now and June 1st, is the motion on the table. And how do we define what kind of permit we're talking about? A little more specificity. I'd feel a little more comfortable.
I would suggest permits for exterior amenities.
Well, my concern there is then it only applies to a very limited number of businesses and a very limited type, right? And that maybe we want to say that, should submit a statement of how it's a COVID related project. Or,
I mean, if we're working with the grant program, they're already going to be bringing that to the
So then it's
MBA,
okay.
and they're
You're
going to be
right.
submitting receipts to the MBA. So,
Yeah,
anything that the
okay.
MBA thinks is COVID related, will
Okay.
accept, basically.
It's any.
So
mitigation. That's true.
So restating the motion, waive permit fees between now and June 1st on any commercial construction projects that are the recipients of an NBA COVID support grant.
Yeah, to mitigate the impact of COVID-19.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Matt, for the thumbs up of administrative approval that this is manageable and doable. And Mona, go ahead. I need a second.
muted.
Sorry, or Bob seconded, or Michelle seconded.
No, Mona, you're muted.
Mona,
Oh,
go ahead.
No, that's it. Second, fine.
I did second that.
Second.
Sorry.
Great.
Sorry.
Thank you. Mona second. Okay. And now discussion of the motion on the table as stated. No discussion. All in favor? Aye. Any
And
opposed? Hearing none,
Thank
it's
you to
unanimous.
Matt
Okay.
for hustling on this and just supporting businesses to get it done.
Okay.
Thank you.
By waiving permit fees. Okay. Any other new business? Mona?
Sorry, now can I, this is just going back to the RES contract. Thank you, Matt, for finding that on the website. I just looked through it in terms of, what would we owe them if we didn't go through the RFP process right away. From the contract, it looks like we simply pay them an hourly rate and we gave them a $1,000 retainer at the start. So even though we've allocated all that other money, I'm assuming all we've paid them so far is for the work that's already been done. Does that sound accurate? So if we decided not to go through with the RFP process right now, I don't think that's not money that's already been spent. That's what I'm trying to clarify, right? Okay.
That's correct. Any other new business? Any old business? Motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Take the vote and then we'll recess into executive session to discuss a personnel matter. All in favor of adjournment? All right. Meeting is adjourned. Have a good night, members of the public. Council members, you're not off the hook yet. We're going to go right into that.